Hi, my name is Ilkka, and I've been playing games like for 30 years and playing hybrid games for 10-15 years. And I've been asked to talk in English, so I will be talking in English. Hybrid gaming. How many of you know this term before? How many of you have, so you know it? Basically all of you know. How many of you think that you have created hybrid games by yourselves? Excellent. So I'm with experts here. So my approach to hybrid gaming is a combination of role-playing, freeform, board, strategy games, and miniature games. And, well, you have to combine at least two of these. And usually role-playing and freeform, as I understand them, are so close to each other that I don't consider that to be hybrid gaming. This is about analog gaming, so face-to-face games, basically based on role-playing games or role-playing. So I'm not talking about digital games here. And I will have 5 examples of games actually created and played, and let's see if we have the time to actually go through all of them. 3 would be nice. Some terms. This is a digital games concept nowadays mostly, which really simply is mixing together domains or sort of styles of technologies of play that are not usually seen together. This usually seen together means that as time progresses, things become less and less hybrid, and we are playing games. Hybridity in games becomes really normal. And this is, in digital gaming, the stress is on technologies, but it could be as simple as a skill and luck-based game together, or skill and luck in the same game, which is basically what we have in role-playing games, for example. Then, when or how we combine these games, it could be like 2 or more games or game types played simultaneously, or one after the other. It's really simple. And then I found in Google this nice definition that cognitively RPGs are sometimes treated as hybrid games. So basically, if you play role-playing games, it's hybrid gaming. And this is no wonder, because the early guys who created role-playing games in the 70s, basically they had to use some mechanics and some methods that were already existing, so they just combined those. So these guys, Gary Gygax, for example, he was playing all kind of different games, and then he just managed to write maybe not the first, but the first successful publicly published commercial game. And TSR, you know where this the name of the firm comes from? TSR, what is it? Tactical Studies Rules. So it's about creating rules that allow some kind of tactical studies. This is what Gary Gygax and his friends started to do. And maybe they didn't know that D&D would be the sort of their best product, so to say. And my examples, to start with, I am a role player primarily, and also I like maps. And this means that every game I create, every game we play together in my gaming circles tends to be based on role playing. So we always start role playing, and then maybe if we perceive the need, then we add like different kinds of rules, different kind of methods, and then we go on with that. And yes, I like using maps, so you will see some maps, but I don't usually play like massive map-based campaigns, so I'm more focused on the roles, people. And my games here that I present to you are sort of the result of maybe the past 10-15 years. So we've been learning, and I stress that it's we, and 2 of the games, at least one of which I have the time to really show you, is actually created by Turkka, who is sitting here. So I will be presenting it, and then later maybe Turkka wants to comment like my presentation of the game. And being together with people who have ideas is of course really important if you want to create games by yourself, or just to loan rules or borrow or steal rules from other games. My 5 examples, I've sort of grouped them together as 2 pivot games. So we have something before, something coming after, and between these two sort of games or game continuums, we have a kind of game that helps us to transfer from one to another. And then a couple of sort of end resolution games. So we've played a role-playing game. Then we realized that now this is so big that we need other methods to play this to the end. But then the game ended there. And then one sort of hybrid campaign, which is basically simultaneous role-playing campaign with miniature battles. If I don't have time to go to the last example, I think it's also the simplest example. And as it happens, 4 out of 5 involve warfare. And I didn't realize that before. So it seems that I create hybrid games that somehow treat or allow the gaming of different kinds of warfare. I don't know if I actually am kind of a war gamer. My history goes back to wargaming. Maybe I was wargamer earlier than roleplay. Okay, and this was the introduction. Do you have any questions, any ideas now? If you want to go to another show? No. So we go to the example. So this is like 2 games here of pivot games. One I call Elder Powers Rise, and the other War in Shkaren, which is a place somewhere in an imagined world. And to start with this, the left one, this is a kind of board I created for this game. I created the board in about 2 hours, just drawing it, and it's very sort of symbolic board that allows us to connect to the setting. We are not actually sort of moving pieces or making moves on this board, moves that would require some mechanics. The players were in practice free to move on this board as they liked. So what is this game, Elder Powers Rise? This is a game that combines 2 approaches to the single event. From the perspective of humans, this is 4 bad years, really bad years. Shit hits the fan, big time. But we are focusing on the kind of elder powers, the gods. So the players are playing, in practice, godly creatures. And we had this omens in our role-playing campaign of 4 bad years for humans, and we have one character, role-playing character, David, who then, in our role-playing game, departed from the human realm to kind of talk with the gods. So this was one of the ideas that sort of required a new approach. Then in this campaign, we had the idea that this is a very sort of medieval fantasy setting. But now I wanted to bring the sort of fantasy races big time into these settings. And this is the moment they sort of wake up, rise. And also we are moving the focus or approach from human-centric political role-playing game into kind of elder powers and mythical level. And why I wanted to do this? We could be role-playing, of course. Role-playing is such a method that I can always assume the role of a god who answers the questions of the player characters. It's easy method. I wanted to show things to my players, to my friends, and of course, gaming allows you not just to show, but to put your players into the roles of these powers that really bring the change. Then another question is, how do the elder powers themselves interact? Are they friends with each other or enemies? And this is of course much funnier to play when your players are assuming the roles of these characters or powers. And then the big question is, what happens to the druid David when he approaches the elders? So what's kind of the destiny of this one person, but what is the destiny or connection of humanity to these powers? This is one of the central themes. And this is a player-inclusive way to create change. So you are the elders, you create the change. And of course the players, they know that in the future we will create, or we are actually already playing, normal human characters in the world which will go wrong. So now they can sort of have fun making the world a shitty place for humans to live. And yes, this is the map, and this is a very sort of symbolic map where the sort of the outer limit, the round circle, connects to real places in our campaign setting. But the sort of the heart and the penis you can see here, this is kind of the a divine realm. This does not exist in the human world, but this map sort of allows the players to understand where their actions happen. And here, if you can see, this is the Storm Giant player. We don't usually, in our sort of tabletop or freeform role-playing, we don't use LARP clothing, but my friend here wanted to really sort of assume the role of this giant, and he was looking very angry, and this had a result that everyone was sort of a bit afraid of him, at least at the start. So this is one method of bringing to the tabletop to bring some effects. And here is our sort of real campaign setting. And if you compare this map, then the outer sort of the circle and the small circles connect to these places. And this is interesting for the players. So the players, we've been playing many campaigns in this campaign setting, and now they understand that if they place, for example, a storm into one realm, then they sort of understand where that storm will happen. And I was using miniatures. We are not gaming with miniatures, but these miniatures are kind of placeholders. They show where each power is at the moment. And at the center you see the Storm Giant and the Dragon. Then between them there is a sort of smaller giant. Then there is some goblin, dwarf, and then the human. This blue little guy on the foreground. And the other use for these miniatures was an answer to the question which the players asked, like, how big is the dragon? Because I guess somebody wanted maybe to slay the dragon early on. And my answer is this big. So basically the players, just looking at these models, they will know who is the mighty one. So basically we have the big giant and dragon, and unless one of them fights the other guy, there is no way to remove these guys from the play. And actually we didn't have a sort of clear mechanics to move anyone out of this game, so the idea was to play for a long time and see how it goes. There are a couple of other figures here. I used them just to show that something else might be also going on. They didn't have a very big effect on the game. So what mechanics? What is hybrid here? What are the methods I use to make this game different from a role-playing game? First of all, I had pre-generated characters without sort of game stats. So this is freeform. We have personalized elder powers and ready-written character stories, which include the attitudes and goals. So this is the normal LARP method, that you are this guy, you want to do this, go play. And one of the very concrete issues here were marriage deals. So we have 5 elder powers, we have 3 sons and 2 daughters. So they have to negotiate to find out who makes alliance with whom and who is sort of left over here. And this is kind of a game like 5 players, 4 seats, and you sort of make the players to move and to talk each other. Another method was sort of this tabletop as a symbolic map, where you can see the places and peoples. And then we had action cards, like each of the elder powers had action cards, and these action cards are simply played. They just place them on the map. So they are so powerful creatures that what they want will happen. And of course, what was written in these action cards is a kind of it shows what power these creatures really have on the world. And then we had a simple round mechanic, which sort of certifies, makes it sure that we have the game progressing. So 20-30 minute turns. So people are discussing frantically, and they know that sooner or later they will play one card here, and the dragon always plays first. So you can't stop the dragon from doing what he will do. He can do anything he wants. The goblin reveals the last card, so nobody can react to the goblin. He's always like backstabbing. This is the sort of character story. And then the others, they will play their cards according to the order around the table. So before the card play, you could actually see some people move a little bit, so that they can see who plays what cards before them. And then we had, this is sort of the escape mechanic, we had this d6 die rolls. If an elder power rolls a 6, somehow this elder power is unsuccessful. And this is kind of a mechanic that helps us to bring a resolution to such aspects of the game that are not sort of designed. So this is sort of a safeguard resolution. Then one big sort of asymmetric part of the game was that these elder powers, they are really all powerful, and they have the action cards, and they can really do things. But one of the players, David, this is again played by Turkka, this is a human druid and RPG character. He can only speak. He has no power whatsoever to influence the map, and he has no son or daughter to marry to the elder powers. And another asymmetric thing was that the goblin had 2 figures on the map, and this allowed the goblin to, of course, do more than the other elder powers. Now here, one question about these games is that if especially if LARP methods sort of get under the skin, in the case of David, like one player really didn't have the sort of the action cards, the sort of power to really play this game. Is it all right? This is unfair. So you have to know the players. You have to trust that these players sort of can play these characters. And as a matter of fact, my games tend to be games where I invite people. So I like to know the players beforehand. Okay, there are 3 slides of how the game processed. This is kind of the second turn, and you can see that the storm giant has gone away from the center, and he's approaching one of the human kingdoms, and no one at this point knew what he's up to. He didn't roll any dice here, but he's sort of approaching. And just moving this one big piece is sort of enough to create the feeling, the atmosphere, the tension. And then on the left, you can't read them, but there are 3 action cards played. And one of them is a storm, and one of them is the dragon burning one kingdom, and the third one is a reaction to this dragon. So the kings and armies of that kingdom are miraculously saved. So I had some cards that sort of could go against a card that was played before them. This refuge card was quite important. It was also one card, actually I think there were 3 refuge cards in this game. So the elder powers can show that they care for humans if they want to play this card. Basically, I didn't rule out the possibility that they never use these cards, or that they actually want to play this card for another elder power. This is towards the end, so the map is being filled with these cards, and then there is sort of agreements between the elder powers. And most of these agreements were created by the Goblin King, who was playing the nasty guy, but who was actually the nasty guy, but who was playing the sort of the guy who helps each other to achieve their goals. And then you can see 2 cities, and these are dwarven cities. The dwarves were building cities, and these cities are in the human kingdom. So the dwarf also had a sort of positive connection between these humans. And then lower part, there is the attack of the goblins. So the goblins attacked to one of the human kingdoms, and actually the dragon then accompanied them. So they were having a sort of alliance. And then on the right, you're seeing one really, really big dragon, and nobody knew this dragon is in the game. This is just my idea that I put this model on the table, and I declared that there's a plague. And of course, because most of the players are elder powers, it doesn't matter to them. The humans are dying in mass. But of course, for David, the one human, this is one more setback he's seeing. But placing this dragon there is just an example of making a change in how the game feels. We didn't have exact rules of what this dragon will do. But towards the end, what the players created was a kind of end battle. And this end battle happened basically between the dragons and humans, and the other elder powers were then supporting one or the other combatant. And actually, you can see on the foreground like 3 human models, but there were a couple of more. And then we had to roll the dice. There was no sort of resolution to this. And as it happened, a couple of humans or human kings or druids perished, but the humans were just able to sort of push the dragons back. So one of the resolutions of this game for our sort of big campaign was that the dragons will not remain here. They will not start to rule this area. And I think I'm reaching the end of the first example. We can start talking soon if you have any comments or questions. And now, where did hybrid help? Like, why was it important to have these methods to play the game like this instead of just normal role playing? The board and the action cards, they focused the game. I think this is very important. You don't have to have very many rules about the board and the action cards or the models. It's enough to sort of focus the game. Like, this is where we are. This is what you're doing. And because most of the players had played quite normal human characters before, it probably helped them to play on this new level. Then this asymmetry and unfairness of David, this also clarified roles. So we have one human, we have the voice of humans who are whining about their complete destruction. And the others have to react to that, or they can just ignore this human. Some basically ignored, or mostly ignored the human. And then my own role in this as a game master is much easier when we have a broad palette of sort of robust methods or mechanics, because then I can also improvise based on them. So I planned this game really fast, but it was also really clear to play this game. Okay, what do you think of these kind of examples? Can you find anything of use in this kind of examples? Yes, please. Wait, I need to give you the mic. So.
Hi, my name is Tommy. Yep, I find this very fascinating, and already got some ideas how to use action cards in this sort of manner in gaming. For example, I'm planning a campaign that involves different small kingdoms. It was initially the idea was to use just a setting for the role-playing game, but I see now that there is a lot more to be done. For example, playing the big houses in the kingdoms, and using, for example, action cards to regulate somehow what they can do in one season or something like that. Because otherwise it could be too freeform to make it work. So I already got some ideas from this. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and the what you said, something would be too freeform or too something. This is also a question that you need to ask your players, like how they want to play it. So creating kind of hybrid games probably is best done somehow together to some degree. But if your players then want to be surprised by the game or want to have sort of mysteries and hidden knowledge, then of course you have to hide something and reveal it during the game. Any other comments, ideas? Let's go to the other sort of pivot game, and this utilized miniatures. So this game was, in a way, for me, it was about world creation or a kind of a in the meantime scenario. So let's go see what happens here. And I made this scenario in a way that it connects two different role-playing games or campaigns, pretty long campaigns, where we had some interesting characters in the past campaign, and we didn't know what came out of them. So we stopped this past campaign before the kind of real resolution to that campaign, and then we moved to play. Actually, we moved to play the sort of normal humans in the middle of the bad years that the previous game was about. So we have storylines, and I'm combining these storylines, showing some aspects of how they connect. This was a military campaign, so we have an invader and a defender. Pretty straightforward. Then this is test of glory, piety, and alliances. The invader and the defender, they are both persons who are whose position, whose status is not completely clear. So if we want to continue using these characters or these non-player characters in our games, it's nice to see like how glorious, how famous figures they really are, who are their friends, who are their enemies. So we are in a way creating the setting for the future game. And then we had battles fought with miniatures, and this system I chose for this game was Hail Caesar, which is a historical ancient medieval battle game. Just how many of you are interested in miniature battle gaming? Quite many. Excellent. So I have something to show and tell you, and you may like it. This was the sort of campaign map. So this is map-based campaign, and basically, as you can see, this map is a grid. And I will return to this map later. Okay. Then why it's interesting for us, for me and my friends to play this? You can see a couple of names in red. So we have the invader, the young Count of Estelan. He has just become the Count. He's like 20 years old. Nobody knows what he will do. Is he up to something? Is he a good ruler or a bad ruler? Then in our RPG we are playing villages. And now the Count of Estelan is enlisting these villagers to fight for him in a foreign country. And the player characters refused and run to the hills, but their friends and some of their enemies went to fight there. So we are interested to see what happens to them. Then I created one sort of oddball character for this game, Julien Barret, or Barret. Who is an ex-noble who is a drunkard and sort of has fallen from grace. And as it happened, just creating one character, giving him some special rules, made him an interesting character for this short game. We played just one day, and we managed to play like all the levels of the game: the role playing, the strategic moves, and 3 miniature battles, or 2 miniature battles and 1 encounter. And in the big picture, of course, we are asking the question like what will happen to these kingdoms? And this game is connected to the last game. So we already know that things will go very badly for the humans in the big picture. And now we get to have a sort of closer picture of how wrong the things go because of human action. So there is at least one invading human with an army, and this usually doesn't herald good things for peasants living in this kingdom. More destinies. the defending the Shkaren forces are commanded by 2 characters from our previous role-playing game. So this Marcel Bastard and Thorvald of Nesver, they are figures that we know very, very well, but we just didn't know what they were up to the last year. And now we see them here. There's reason why the Bastard is leading the defending army, but there's also a reason why he is not very well established leader. But if he wins this contest, if he can drive away the invader, he might become a key figure in the succession in his kingdom. He might become a king or a person that could become a king if he can prove himself. And then we had some barbarian allies to Marcel, and again we had played a lot, like at least 10 gaming sessions that involved these barbarians, and they were kind of the friendly guys in our previous game, but in this game, like, we wanted to see what they're up to, what they want to do. They are allies to this Marcel the Bastard, but how he uses them will like show if they're nice or very evil guys. Also, if everyone dies but the barbarians are left on the table, then we know that barbarians probably invade the civilized realms. Okay, this is a campaign map, and we are playing our role-playing game here in the north, and we had played here on the left side, on the western side, the previous game, and now this Count of Estelan leads his armies from the northern region to this sort of southern region, and we find a connection between these 2 campaigns. And here are some of the models. These are just normal Warhammer Empire models we used for this game, and here's the character sheet of Julien Barret. And you probably can't read, but he's a drunkard, and before every game we roll how drunk he is and what's the game effect. And these kind of sort of minimal, small rules emphasize the roles of these individual characters. Julien Barret is the only one where we actually roll the die. The other ones are kind of leaders who can then play their action cards. And I have to go back, I don't have the photo here, but yeah, I need another mic, so you have it there. Thanks. So in order to speak and show pictures, so each unit has a unit card which can be taken away from the unit. Can you hear me? Yes. Which can be taken away from the unit and used on the sort of strategic map. This is important because we are playing on 2 different levels. We could just pick one figure and use it on the map, but this sort of it's easier to handle the cards. And here behind you can see some tactical cards. So both of the armies have some tactics, and this is sort of asymmetric in a way that one army fights a bit differently from the other. And these are the defending units. Then not shown here is the deck of kind of strategic or diplomacy cards, which can be used between the miniature battles, so to create alliances or seek to create alliances, also to do some stuff which is kind of purely role-playing level stuff, but will then create glory because these combatants, these leaders of this battle, they are in a way they're quite young, chivalrous knights who want glory, who want to show piety, and so on. Okay, let's go back to this. So, choosing the game or choosing the different methods of play for this game. For role-playing game level, we used Freeform with diplomacy cards. So, of course, we have 2 players for each side. So these players are speaking with each other, and then of course they can try to talk to the opposing player. There's nothing wrong with that. Then they can play diplomacy cards, and when they play diplomacy cards, I will play, as a game master, I will play the other party. Then movement is map-based strategy. This is really, really simple. The movement values for each unit, and that's it. Then the Hail Caesar, the battle game, we created the key characters with the HC mechanics. And that, of course, changed the characters a little bit. And it also meant that they become very, very easy to kill, because in Hail Caesar, if a lone character is caught in the battle, he is practically dead. And also, if a character supports a unit, there is a big chance that the character will be wounded. So actually, Hail Caesar, the game, is more focused on warfare between units and formations. This is not kind of a Warhammer game where the individual characters are really powerful. Then we had army rosters created for this game just by the feel of medieval fantasy. For example, one of the possible allies were the goblins. And of course, a medieval fantasy game doesn't have rules for goblins, so I just went with the feel, like how the unit should look like in this game. And then we had this card-based kind of resource or feedback mechanics between different levels or domains of the game. So using one sort of card here might mean that you cannot use the same card there. So this creates the kind of strategic and tactical choice. We also had rules how many cards you can play in each stage. So the players had to decide what they want to achieve. Here is a picture of the last battle, and on the left, on this piece of white paper, it's actually a bishop. This is a non-player character who brings glory to whoever controls this figure at the end. So I used some of these sort of proxies or tokens in the middle of the battle to sort of make them more interesting. Okay, are you interested in hearing in detail how this campaign went? This is not necessary to show what hybrid methods I was using. Maybe I just briefly show. The starting position is that on the right we have Estelon, the invader. Then before them we have one garrison in blue, and most of the defending unit starts on the sort of opposite corner of the table. Then on the left lower corner you can see a city. This is an independent power, and both of the players can approach this city and try to make it their ally, which brings more units on the table. And then on the sort of northern left corner, we have the barbarians who are already allied with Marcel. These were kind of the big allies available. Then things started to roll. And in this situation, both parties try to approach this city, and both I was playing this city, and they were very unclear about what they want and who they will support. So both of these armies are then insecure about their flank. Is this city an enemy or a friend? More movement. For example, this garrison here. Retreated without giving a fight. This is important. In normal, if you play like miniature battle campaigns, you usually have a battle after each turn. But this kind of gaming allows you to also retreat. You don't have to battle every time if you are outnumbered badly. Okay, turn 2. There's more movement, and now we have a battle because the defenders don't retreat. Then a very, very funny move here. Namely, Marcel, our defending general himself and his most elite troops, he decides he doesn't trust this city at all. So he took his best troops and he himself rode there to fight them. So we don't have a leader for the defending army here, so we have to substitute the other leader, which we know is a role-playing character too. We know this leader very well, we just know that he's maybe not a military leader at all. And the barbarians are moving there, and after this battle the defenders retreat. Now, Hail Caesar is a system, it's a game system that creates many things. It creates story. And that means that it involves luck. And this game was really, really funny because most of the key roles or the key sort of charges, the key phases of the battle went wrong. And for a game that sort of tries to simulate ancient or medieval warfare, I think this is okay. But the experience is just very different from kind of Warhammer games where you control each unit and they mostly do what you like them to do. For example, the attacker sustained practically no losses at all, but his advance was so miserable that I decided that the whole defending army escapes. And we had one really, really interesting feature, because the sort of household knights of the invading general, the household knights of Estland, just misunderstood like every command they got. And this we interpreted, or we made a story out of it. This is a young count, and he himself placed himself with the infantry. Now the knights are all sorts of chivalrous people who want to make the charge, but if their count is not with them, like why are they fighting? So we decided that we can see that the knights despise their own general for being with the infantry instead of the knights. So this was kind of role-playing aspect, role-playing story told on the base of what we created with the Hail Caesar rules. And yes, this is creating the world basically, because it doesn't have an effect on the fighting value of these units later. The count can position with the knights, and the knights can do their charges later. Okay, this is the interesting part, this lone charge or lone attack of the defending general Marcel the Bastard. And usually in war games, when you have just one attacking unit and one defending unit, this is a really boring scenario. I wouldn't like to play this at all. But because we are playing this in a sort of many-staged mini campaign, we played through this confrontation, and the battle went back and forth, of course, because defenders in a castle are quite good fighters, and they have crossbows. But on the other hand, the attackers were like elite knights, and they didn't give up as long as Marcel was with them. And what happened was that Marcel was wounded several times. Hail Caesar usually makes this happen, that if your character is in a fight, he is wounded, but he saved all his wounds, probably because of his armor. And we know from our role-playing game that this guy has probably the best, most advanced armor in this setting. So it felt okay that he survived. Whereas the defending town militia captain was very, very badly wounded. And because he is the sole leader available to this town in our game, there is no other to lead the militia out of the town into combat. The result was that Marcel was able to remove this faction from the game effectively. If anybody would have attacked the city militia would have been there, but practically the city militia was unable to march and take part in future battles. So this was really a key point, you could say. But now we have Marcel really far away from his army, and he receives news that his army has been actually defeated and it's retreating. And again, the turn 3, the Estland invading count moves one forward. Like why he is moving just one move instead of charging with his cavalry like Marcel did. This is because he had his baggage train, his supply with him, and the movement of the baggage train is just one. So the invader had the possibility to sort of do nice maneuvers, but because he was very careful not to lose his supply, we can see him like advancing directly towards this big castle in the northwest, little by little, fighting any opposition had. And at turn 3, we also have the goblins joining the battle, because this very chivalrous and glorious and pious general, the young Count of Estland, felt that, yes, I want to make a pact with the devil, so to say. So he succeeded, and there are goblins, but I will be playing the goblins, so nobody really knows how they make their appearance and what they will do in this battle. But we know that something really nasty will happen. And of course, the defending players, well, I think you guys here, you sort of anticipated that, yes, something has been done, but you didn't know what was coming. Marcel rides back to his army, but because he arrives late, we place the model on the map later than the first turn. Or he has to ride a couple of turns to really join his army. The barbarians are called for this battle, and they also arrive late because of this map. From this map we can see that they will arrive late. And we will roll the dice to see when they actually arrive in the miniature battle, and then the goblins are coming. Okay, and the end result of this battle was like this battle was really going back and forth, partly because the Hail Caesar rules make some of the units fail, and partly because, for example, the defender Marcel was playing with very small units, trying to do many things with them, and some things failed and some things succeeded extremely well. Again, the invading army, the cavalry of the invading army, didn't do much. But at the end, it looked like the invading cavalry would be able to penetrate the defenses of the defender. The goblins had torn a big hole in the defending line. And what happened then is that suddenly, because of some game mechanics, Hail Caesar game mechanics, the opposing generals, the Count and Marcel the Bastard, met on the battlefield. And because we are not strictly playing a miniature battle game, but we have this role-playing level, the players of these characters just decided that let's do individual combat. Let's see who is the best. And then we used the deadly Hail Caesar rules, and none of these two was killed. So they went back to their troops, like saying that yes, I defeated the opposing general. But because of very bizarre things happening, the attackers then had the knights of Marcel flanking them, and while pursuing their enemy, these knights accidentally overrun the Count of Estland. And we used the Hail Caesar rules, and this time he died there. So at the time, the Count is almost able to defeat the enemy and ride to this castle. He suddenly is dead. Mostly because he wanted to stay very close to his enemy. Maybe because he wanted to do this individual battle, individual combat with Marcel. And as you can see the barbarians have arrived, but they didn't really have an influence in the battle. What happened when the invading army the invading general was killed was that Julien Barrett, this individual that we didn't know much about, he assumed the control of the infantry, and he raised the white flag and got the terms to go back home. The honorable terms to go back home, so he saved this infantry, which was still left on the table. So he's one of the key characters that will return home, and is then one of the key characters in our role-playing game, or could be a key character. But because in our role-playing game, our characters did not approach or support him, he was and the end left to the side. But this game helped to create one named character in our world and in our role-playing game. So the methods here, we had the free role-playing game among the leading characters of each army, then diplomacy, alliances, and map-based movement, which is a strategy game, and battle resolution with miniatures. So we use all of these methods during the same day, like 7-8 hours of gaming, very, very varied gaming. Enjoyable gaming, I hope at least. And of course, we had a kind of feedback system between all of these levels. So, for example, using cards here but not there, and of course, role playing throughout this whole continuum. Okay, I think I've talked about this already, how it went. Okay, this was my second example using these different methods, and I have been given another hour to speak. Are you interested to hear more examples? Do you have comments, ideas, questions?
Yeah. So I actually had a couple of maybe like practical things about this example. If you don't mind, a question in two parts.
Yep.
So first about the amount of, let's say, preparation compared to a traditional non-hybrid RPG, and then the kind of like the practical amount of time it takes to stage, say, for example, one world map turn and let's say like one battle or something like that.
Yep. So the real preparation for this game, well, of course, as a game master, I have been creating this world like behind the scenes, so I cannot strictly say how many hours I've spent like coming up with Estel and Shkaren and their rulers and this kind of stuff. I can't say that. But when I got the idea, it maybe took a couple of days to sort of shake down the reality of the future game. A couple of days means maybe 10 hours. Then, as you could probably see, this strategic map is really fast drawn. So I didn't sort of have a high production value, so maybe an hour here. And as I draw the map, I could already sort of picture how these moves will happen. So I was not foreseeing a very long game here. Like just 4 moves will take the invaders to the castle on the right top corner. I didn't really know Hail Caesar as a game system before. This was the first time I was using it, but I have miniature gaming friends and I had talked with them and I sort of understood the basics. And Hail Caesar is a really easy system to learn because it's also a bit vague in the way that you give orders to your units and you can just give whatever orders you want. And then we see if the unit succeeds doing them, and depending on what the opposition does, then we sort of determine if there's a fight, if there's some bowfire, or if the units just stop before making contact. The Hail Caesar allows this, but you have to play it in a friendly manner, I would say. So studying the system and explaining it to the players, it's just a couple of hours, really. We had the miniatures practically painted. We had one session of painting a couple of units before, and we set the table. Of course, we couldn't set the miniatures there, but we basically set the table and brought the miniatures to the gaming locale like the day before. So yes, a couple, 2-3 days, some frantic painting. All for like 7-8 hours of gaming, but it was really, really fruitful gaming, like also creating the world and giving us ideas about the future of our game. And what I find really, really important is that this kind of games, just like the one example before, they empower the players. Like this is not me telling the story of how the Count rode there and fought. But this is the players making the decisions. I create a game so that the players can create the setting for me, because I love the setting, but it's important to give the setting to others. I think this is important, and using these hybrid methods allows the players like really fast to grasp what the game is about and what they can do. But as players who like to play in this setting, they can also use these cards and use these heroes to create a setting they like, quite simply. Okay, did I answer the question? Anything else? Any ideas? Any questions? Right. Okay. I do have like 50 minutes, and I will simply go to the next example. Right. There are two end resolution games. One of them is Copper Town, which is a game set in the world of Glorantha, and this is a game like almost completely visioned by Turkka. And then this Command Point game is Warhammer 40k role-playing game, Rogue Trader, but played in a bit different way. And these are much faster examples than the two before. So Copper Town, basically, by Turkka, is a multiplayer hex strategy in Glorantha, with limited diplomacy and sub-games or scenarios within the game. And why and what is hybrid here? So here I'm one of the players in our RPG game or campaign, and I lost control of the situation, and big things started to happen, and my decision was sort of not wildly right there and sort of take action. I was more like taken back and looking like, oh my god, now the barbarians will attack us. So because in this role-playing game there was like no impetus to tell the story of the big thing. We were just waiting for it to happen. It is a good idea to move to another level to sort of really see how it goes. It's a clever idea. What happens when the tribes run amok? So this is one central town and tribes around it. And the town has ruled the tribes, but now me as the commander of the town, I've lost control. So the tribes will come and sort of create a world of their own. And this is a classic example, in a way, classic of RPG followed by a strategy game. Simple as that. And of course, it involves exploration of the setting. So making this strategy game meant that we talked with Turkka here, and it's sort of we have to create more, because in a role-playing game there is always the game master who can respond to any questions by the players, and this kind of assures that there is something to play always. But if we are looking at a kind of strategy game, it has to be involving enough and interesting enough for all parties to play in order that it's worthwhile to go on the strategy level. And we created a lot of sort of mini stories or descriptions of the barbarian tribes, for example, for the players. Here we can see this had very high production values, this game. Turkka happens to be a graphic designer, so it's good to have skilled people in your gaming group if you want to go really, really strategic. Much better maps than I was producing. Okay, so we have 6 factions, and the original game didn't have cards, but these have been added later to the game. So basically Turkka created a whole strategy game with 6 factions, and this map holds a couple of nice things. First of all, you can see these tokens there. These are copper wagons. So the game has a sort of automatic system that copper is mined in some mines there, and from these mines the copper wagons start their voyage towards the copper town. So there is kind of an economy running here. And then the aggressive tribes have their own ideas of what to do with these copper wagons. And actually the different factions receive victory points treating the wagons differently. Like they don't have just to pillage the wagons, they can also take them or do something of their own with them. And another thing on this map is the sort of sub-games or mini-games or encounters. So there are a couple of special hexes on this map. And if you enter these hexes, you get to use the sort of mythic power of your troops or your leaders. And if you succeed, you get to roll on a table, which produces something fun. And you may also influence this roll a little bit, depending on your success or your powers, maybe. So when playing this game, we repeatedly saw that people are really interested in what happens there. And these special encounters then can bring you some powerful items, simple victory points, or allies, or they can bring forth a sort of even maybe a new faction, some powers, some Gloranthan creatures which are not friendly to anyone. So in a way, this game sort of assures that something will always be going on, something will happen. And here you can see one of the faction sheets, where on the left you have the victory conditions, and this copper town had 6 victory, no, not conditions, but where they get victory points. So this faction had 6 different ways to get victory points. And this is also a way to assure that there is something to play, because the situation might be really bad, but you can still try to do something. And most factions, I believe, had one less, so about 5 different ways of earning victory points. Yeah. And just to note the sort of production values of this game, this is practically a self-contained strategy game with cards and some art too. Okay, so an example of why and how you could create a sort of strategy game, hex-based strategy game based on a role-playing campaign. And of course, playing this game, in the end, we've played it many times, and maybe none of these times is the sort of real end resolution to this role-playing campaign. But it's interesting. It has kept its interest for maybe half a dozen or even dozen gaming sessions. So it was a self-contained, interesting game in itself. So we repeatedly could return to this campaign and think it over again. Then the other common point, Warhammer 40k, this futuristic or science fantasy game setting. The common point was before that, Warhammer settings, both the fantasy and science fiction, they are of course families of games already. So if you enjoy these stories, these games, you will have role-playing games, many editions of role-playing game. You will have the miniature battle game, also the sort of skirmish, different levels of miniature games and specialist games, and then you have board games produced for each. So basically, actually the same thing goes for Game of Thrones, where you also have a family of games. So if you want ready-made games, these are like good settings to start with, or good companies to go for if you want ready-made games, but still you have to connect these games by yourself. Okay, we used the RPG, Rogue Trader, and then why? Well, it's of course not Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Okay, I seem to have the wrong topic here, really. So this is a summary of some other game that I'm not actually talking about now. Okay, we have the Rogue Trader, and we have, in this game, we didn't use miniature or anything like that. In the Command Point game, we had unreliable communications as cards. So I had pre-designed a card back, and every time they wanted to contact their forward observation point, like what is happening there, or maybe once every half an hour, they would turn a card and read what is there. And in some command points, you started to hear screams and buzz, and in some others, the reports were like, now demons are attacking us, or we've lost, and crying, and this kind of thing. and then the enemy is approaching, and in this command point they do have some reserves, but actually personnel is running out. So we have a map, and they are delegating their troops, like go fight there, go fight there, try to stop the enemy. There's basically a chaos incursion happening. And we had disagreements on the strategy. The hybrid thing, this was mostly a role-playing game. Our rogue trader characters just got bigger than normal responsibility. They became kind of leaders of the planetary defense. And then this RPG was enhanced by cards. We had a map, and we had this live time, and all of this created a lot of tension. This was really intensive gaming session for us. And during this gaming session, it just happened that there was a total loss of trust between the characters. I hope it was between the characters. I was discussing this later, that it wasn't a sort of fight between the players, but one of the characters killed the other. Like the second in command killed the commander because the second in command, she didn't believe that the commander is making the right choices. And this came like out of the blue for me. Although the players, then both of these players later asked me, like, how did you make us to do this? I didn't make them to do it, I swear. And then we had another, or a third player character actually made a deal with the demon. So we can see that this sort of imperial command is totally collapsing during this game. The tension was really, really bad. And I was using kind of multiple pressure methods to help the game get under the skin. So this hybrid thing was not very prominent. We still had the role-playing game mechanics there, but just adding pressure and keeping the clock ticking and making it clear that the defenses are crumbling everywhere. We created this command point situation where the command really collapsed. So a fun game, and actually I don't know if we had the idea that this would be an end resolution game, really, but it was such. So we thought that some key persons of the campaign were dead or sort of maybe moving to the opposing side, the case side. It's a bit unclear. We stopped the game here. Really, a very long campaign. We stopped it with this game. Phew. So that was quite fast. What do you think of this kind of gaming? Could you imagine of creating a sort of resolution to your role-playing campaign using adding different kind of mechanics or using different kind of methods? You can probably already see that I have a certain sort of package of methods used here. And one of them is cards. The cards are really effective because cards add the feeling that if I play this card, this thing will really happen. This is now true. Also, if I turn this card, then this card is part of the game. Whatever my interpretation of it is there. This thing, it has now happened. I love this kind of mechanics. But you have to devise the cards and devise the encounters carefully. They can add to the feeling, but well, of course, I have tried this method before, and it doesn't always work. I think nowadays it usually works, so I understand how to use the cards. And some other like timed turns in role playing. So please play role-playing game for 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, and now things will roll. The change will come. Again and again. Sort of adding turns to role-playing game keeps the action building and going. This kind of sort of basic methods. No more questions. So then my last example will be Warhammer Fantasy. Warhammer Fantasy. And yes, these Warhammer settings are supported by miniature battle games, role-playing games, board games, specialist games. In this campaign, we used, this is also a campaign by Turkka. It was totally sort of run by Turkka. And we used Warhammer fantasy role-playing game, and the Warhammer Fantasy Battle Miniatures game, with some adjustments which I interpret as Mordheim adjustments. Well, I talked with Turkka, and Turkka sort of didn't see the Mordheim connection, but a connection in general with Game Workshop games. So the Games Workshop games, and especially Rogue Trader, this original science fiction miniature battle game, they have like character development mechanics, which Turkka knew about and could then sort of use or sort of picture what kind of changes were possible. Okay, this is the map. This is one corner of the human empire, and I don't think I saw this map. This is a Game Master map. I've never seen it before, but Turkka sent it to me the day before yesterday. And I think the red ones are chaos. So there's a chaos coming from the north, and the violet ones are undead, or necromancers and vampires stirring there. So the human realm is under attack. This is a constant theme in all Warhammer. So we are playing according to the spirit of Warhammer. Then there's the orcs coming from here, an orc invasion, and they have penetrated the defenses of the dwarves. So we also have some dwarves running there, like seeking help, and we were usually unable to help them. So this human-dwarf connection is also there. And our campaign took us from the river Styr to Sylvania, so in the middle of the action. And this kind of started when our village was attacked. And after that, there were some key characters who gave us missions, who like formed us into a real fighting force with gold and missions. And we had a lot of miniature battle combat on the route. And of course, some of this combat were losses, like dramatic losses. But because we are playing a campaign, we interpret the losses not as like total destruction, even if all of our troops were taken out off the table. But we interpret them as like running away from the enemy, getting wounded, these kind of things. For example, my character in this campaign was like constantly beaten to death according to Warhammer rules, but we saw that he became like half blind, cripple, half madman, but he still continued to lead his troops as best as he could. Now, in addition to this, like this idea of the campaign, Turkka used the same map but created regions or areas there. So helping the game master was this kind of area game. And I think after about midway this campaign, Turkka actually showed this to us, and we started to plan our moves on this map. So in a way, showing this map to the players made the players much more aware of the situation. So my character and the helping characters, second in command, we were kind of learning about the world, but also learning about military command. The Warhammer Fantasy role-playing rules do not have like clear skills for big scale strategic command, but using this map or showing this map to the players in a way is a phase where the players gather enough knowledge and understanding, and they can start planning big scale. This is a picture of Turkka is here using actually tokens from Coppertown to show the human reserves or the human soldiers available. And one of the key issues in this game was who is leading these humans. Do they join our army? Do they stay in their villages? Or do they actually join the army of a competing general? For example, here there was a big mage, and he was also able to lead his men, and in the end we didn't make a real deal with him. So he had his own troops, we had our own troops, and we had some problems in coordinating the troops to defeat the enemies. It's a typical Warhammer situation where the humans are bickering among each other when the enemy is approaching. So we have Warhammer role-playing game and then Warhammer battle game. What kind of alterations or additions we made to these games? At one point, I got really interested in the development of my character, and together with Turkka, we sort of went through how to abridge the RPG mechanics and the miniature game stats, and we created kind of a system to keep the character creation on the RPG level, but transforming that creation into miniature game rules. And what we found out was that my character was not destined to be a very great general. His starting stats were quite poor for that job, but he kept to be the leader, and he kept losing. Okay, then we had a system to recover a part of the losses, and I always thought that this is somehow tied to the overall result of the battle, of course, that if we win, we can return more troops back to line, and if we lose, then at least the wounded are left there and dead. But talking with Turkka, I sort of got the impression that this was more tied to the story, really, so there was no kind of simulative system here. Am I right? Yes. Then we had a system for skill improvement, but this wasn't really a system. Turkka told me that it was also more part of the story. But of course, the Warhammer battle game system allows the troops to become a bit tougher, and you can add equipment for them and stuff. Then we have the system for equipment improvement, which is yes, this includes the magical items, but we also hired a smith to our troops, and then used this smith in role-playing to create gear for our troops, so we could add some armor to our troops. And while we were managing the units on the army roster, on the sort of battle game level, we were also managing these units individually, and I don't think, or I don't know if it was really meant to be this way, but I got really, really attached to each man in the army. I was really, really broken when some members of the units who already had names died or were wounded. This was horrible for me. And one thing this system or way of gaming allowed was that we could pick experienced men from the ordinary units and reform them into elite units. Turkka was really, really careful not to let us use the best units in the army books, although the opposing armies sometimes had like really efficient units. So we were. It felt like we were the underdog, but with these kind of adjustments, we could try to form our pitiful humans into sort of a more effective fighting force. So it felt like we were leading an army and we had real options. But maybe we didn't. Maybe Turkka, the game master, in the end sort of just decided what kind of battles will come, what point values and stuff would be. And this doesn't really matter, because the story that we experienced was really interesting, and each of the battles was really sort of interesting. Even when we won big time or lost big time, it sort of kept interesting the game. And I think combining games and using these kind of methods is basically about making interesting games. Yeah, this is a summary of how this felt, this game. This is like my personal account of how great the game was for me. That's all my examples. And we have half an hour of time, so we can discuss freely, and you can ask any questions, please. Call it a day. Yep. Thanks for attending, listening, asking questions. Please, there's a mic here if you could ask a question here. If it's part of this presentation, then the organizers would like you to use the mic just to have your questions, comments. There's on front row.
Hey, thank you very much. This is a very interesting presentation, and I think for myself the best in this Ropecon, because I came here to get ideas to develop different hybrid gaming campaigns. I've been doing some with different levels, but I see that you have been using in your group a lot of different mechanisms to make it very interesting, and also to increase the complexity, what can happen, what sort of things happen. And I've got a lot of ideas from this, and it's a very good presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the key thing I must repeat here is that this was not done by me or any individual, even not just me and by Turkka, but to have close friends who share their ideas and are interested into each other's ideas. This is the key. Like, if I wouldn't be so well supported, I wouldn't, of course, be creating these games. Yes, by all means.
It would be good to talk a bit about how did you choose different mechanics for different things, because that has been a bit of a problem for me sometimes. For example, to combine a reasonably good strategic rules into basically RPG rules, it's sometimes very difficult. So you have to cut corners, and it might create some discrepancies that doesn't feel that good. Yeah. Interestingly, Games Workshop hasn't preached any of their games, which is pretty interesting actually. Yeah. They have been doing something with the Dungeons and Dragons miniature things, but it's so very different because it has the absurd level mechanics for army-based campaigning. Yeah. So I'm sometimes wondering which rule systems to use to do a consistent, or at least somewhat consistent experience. How did you decide on this?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I give the mic to Turkka, who will answer your question regarding Coppertown game.
Yeah, so Coppertown, we were playing this King of Dragon Pass kind of. What is the name of the board game? It's
an old, like, 70s
Dragon Pass,
board game.
It's like this old school Glorantan board game, and basically Coppertown is like a hack from that. Like, it's like a modification. It uses pretty much the same combat rules, and it's stripped down from magic and all the bullshit, and then it's kind of, adapted to the world. Of course, it was back in the days when I didn't have kids yet, so I had a little bit more time to put in the production value. It's not necessarily like to go that far, as with our recent games. Ilkka has shown some of the more symbolic maps or whatever. It can happen on different levels, but I would be inspired by whatever you have been playing or you have liked about. It can be even just any board game, basically. Just borrow the rules and just make it on the map that suits your campaign. I think you can get far. The same way we have done with our like a Warhammer Fantasy Battle campaign. Actually, it started the way that we wanted to play fantasy battles, but we also always consider that we need to have some kind of context for it, because it's a little bit maybe boring, and I like myself playing these computer games when you have like this campaign and you get attached to your troops and maybe they get veteran or better, and there's like a progression that way. So in that sense, it was interesting campaign because the like personal level of the RPG level of the was the motivation factor, but the kind of the strategic battles were what we were after in a way, like originally what we wanted to play. So that's how the last example went. But
yeah, my answer to this is a real problem, of course. My answer is threefold. First of all, like 25 years ago, or 28 years ago, I created my first hybrid game, and I used Second World War tank tactics in Middle-earth. And because Second World War tank tactics are all about shooting, it meant that the elves carry the day every time we played. So it didn't feel good because the players we had played a sort of role-playing campaign where they actually went to create alliances, and with huge effort they could bring hundreds of troops of men and dwarves together. And then, because of the game mechanics, they were just sort of defending the camp, and the elves went in the woods and killed all the orcs. So yes, it can go wrong. And of course, my problem there was that I only had these 2 games. I had a role-playing game, and I had 1 tactical game. And I didn't have the internet, and I didn't have the money to go to buy games and just read them out and just test them. And I didn't have friends, or it didn't cross my mind to ask my friends, because I did have some gaming friends, and it wasn't fun. So my first answer is that no, you don't always succeed, and you have to accept that. The second thing is that sometimes, you should keep playing games, because sometimes you just realize that, oh my god, this is a good mechanic. And then you make a mental note and maybe later use that mechanic. But nowadays my approach is more about the story, what kind of story I want to tell, and what kind of, how rich the story should be in this respect or in that respect, or what kind of end resolution I want to see regarding, for example, what kind of starting point I want to have for our next game or role-playing game, which things must be decided. So I design the games based on this. But of course I always like to design games that involve the players, let them do things, and are sort of easy to follow, easy to understand, even for friends who don't intensively play in our role-playing games. And it means that the conceptual design of these games probably goes on months before I actually sit down and write them. And during those months, I sort of accept or reject some of my own ideas. It's simple, but yeah, something happens in here. It's hard to explain, but the key, I believe, is to play different games and see different mechanisms, and then you don't have to. You can borrow and steal, but maybe you don't have to, because you sort of start to understand how games function. Okay, I have to admit, for 15 years, I've been quite interested in what is called game theory or role-playing theory. I read a lot. And that does help. So when I speak of methods or mechanics, these words really mean something, and I usually can picture how this method or mechanic will influence the game. So some level of kind of theorizing your own gaming is good to sort of make clear what you're actually doing in games. Yeah. There isn't a sort of easy way, I would say, to devise these games. Yeah. This has been great. Thanks a lot for you. I was astonished that I could actually keep this thing going this long, because I was I don't know why I was given 2 hours to speak, really, but thanks to you we had something to speak. Yeah, excellent. So I think I'll call it a day. I'm off for a beer now. If anyone wants to join me, please do. Thanks.